Hi, in this episode I'm going to take a look at quite a lot of the new features in the coming QGIS 3.12 Bucharest. To be clear, when I'm recording this, QGIS 3.12 hasn't been officially released yet. So I am going to test all of this in, call it a beta version of the release. So quite a few things may still change, and it will probably not be as stable as the final release will be. So bear that in mind. I'm using the master or beta version so that I can publish the video before the actual release in about a week from now. So if you are eager to test the new functions, you can do that in order to help the developers to find bugs. Otherwise, you need to wait until the official release, and that should be in about a week from the time of this recording. So I will be starting QGIS from the terminal, so any crashes will capture the error messages. And as you see, this is the development version. Okay, I have quite a long list, so I will probably have to pause the video or fast forward it at times and make some cuts. Otherwise, the video will be very long. So let's get started. First of all, some features and so on that I am not going to be able to test, but I think it's important to highlight them. And another thing, there's at the time of this recording no finished change log. So I've been browsing through the GitHub commits, and some of the features that I present may actually be excluded in the end. But I think that most of them already are committed and stable, so they will be included. But for instance, the things that I haven't been able to test could be things that is not included. But anyway, so one of the news is that the data provider for PostGIS rasters are now included in the QGIS core. Rasters in PostGIS has been sketchy, but this promises to improve that situation, and that is until there is better support included in the GDAL driver. So that is something that could benefit those of you who use rasters inside PostGIS. Also, Oracle support is improved. So now you are going to be able to use curves and surfaces according to the Oracle standard, at least. If I read the commits correctly, this will also be backported to 3.10, the long-term release. We'll see about that. For OGC API features, there is now also the possibility to use simple transactions. So put, patch, and delete is now also available. If you have a lot of off-site layers and those are unavailable, you can now tell QGIS to ignore those messages, error messages, for a certain time or for the entire session. So you don't get an error message for each layer that is unavailable. There has also been some improvements to the DXF exports. So if you're exporting DXF format, the styles of the geometries are also exported. The Z coordinate or 3D geometries are preserved, and labels are exported with anchor points and alignment respected. So that is some of the improvements that I haven't been able to test, but I thought was interesting to mention. So let's start with things that I can actually show you something about, at least. So one improvement is that now you can decide if you want the default save format to be QGIS or QGIS. And most of us are quite happy with the QGIS format, but for those of you who really need the QGIS format, you can now set that in this global variable, and it will be permanent until you change it in this setting. Some changes in the GUI. I'll just add a simple map. If you have a GPS connected, I don't, but if you have a GPS connected, you will get a distance from your current location to your mouse pointer down here in the status bar. You get the same function when you pan a map. So you grab it and you pan it, you will get the pan distance and direction in the status bar. So the distance and direction from the GPS location will work in much the same way. That is one new feature. As you see in the browser panel, there's a lot of stuff here. So for instance, I don't really use some of them, and the observant ones of you may already see that some are missing, and that's because in the interface customization you can now change what is visible. So I've removed ArcGIS feature services or ArcMap service, but if I put them back, click OK, it will not show up. But if I restart QGIS, now they are there. So right now you can customize what kind of layers will be visible in your browser. Another new thing in the browser is when you have OGC layers, you can now see if my network is here. You can now refresh the connection, so you don't have to restart your application if you know that the server and the layers that are served have been changed. You can just refresh the connection and get the updated layers. So let's see. Some improvements on 3D. Here's some elevation difference. One thing that I haven't tested is that 3D vector layers now will load a lot faster. Let's see what my notes say. Yeah, 3D vector layers are loaded in the background, so that will have some improvement on the rendering. Another news is that when you measure, you now get the horizontal distance and the vertical distance and the 3D distance. So when you do your measurements, now it will also measure the elevation difference. I think there is still some things to do to make this stable, because in 310 3D is reasonably stable, but I'm not quite sure about 312 as of yet. But that's the case when you are working with that beta version. One thing that is new that I actually have very little experience of is mesh layers. So let's see if I had a mesh project prepared. So what is meshes? Well, I'm not quite sure. They are used in meteorology for weather, and I really don't know what it is, but you can get mesh data from weather services and so on, and you can style it in a few different ways. Previously, for instance, for the vector part of meshes, you could only use arrows, and you couldn't style them that much. But right now, you can also use traces, as you saw in the beginning, like that, and you can use streamlines. Hopefully. Yeah, there we go. Well, go back to traces. There is also a new option dialog here, where you can select different different methods for how data is presented, I guess. I'm not quite sure how this works and what the value of it is, but there's this option as well. There are some improvements to the raster part as well. I'm not quite sure of what. And in the settings, you can now not just select the time if your mesh is time enabled. You can actually animate it. Let's see. Set some animation settings, and then it will render the frames in the time series. However, as you see here, I haven't given it enough time to render the traces. So not really fluent, but there is this play option. Okay, let's go on. If you have a layer with missing data sources, they may have been moved or otherwise displaced. There's now an Autofind function. So if the data haven't been moved too far away from its original location, this function will probably find it, unless it has been renamed. But if it just has been moved, this Autofind function will probably find it. As far as I've noted, if it turns green, it has been found. It doesn't update the data source path here, and you still press keep unavailable layers, but your layers will be there, and it will be hopefully updated in the source. Yes, so they are now in the displaced data folder. That is one improvement. Some processing improvements. Detect dataset changes. That is actually comparing two versions of the exact same layer. So if you have created a layer in the office and you send that layer out to others, and they edit their layers and send them back to you, you somehow need to collect all those changes. Then you can compare your original layer with their revised layers, and it will output 3 layers, one with the unchanged features, one with added features, and one with deleted features. And then you can more easily merge all the edits together. So I think this will be great when you're a lot of people using local data for editing. Another improvement, if you want to rename a field, there's now a processing tool that lets you do that. So I don't think I have any attribute names here, no. But it will create a new layer where the fields or the field you select will be given a new name. There's a function that was also available previously with join attributes by location, but now you have new join types. So you can now take the attributes of the first matching feature only, or you can take the attributes of the feature with the largest overlap only. So this is useful when you have a lot of overlapping polygons, and you want to join attributes from one polygon layer with another, but you only want attributes from the layer that is most overlapping, if that makes sense. There's been some improvements in Raster MB tiles. In this version, you will have a smoother transition when you are between tile levels. Previously it was nearest neighbor, but now there will be a smooth transition between them. I'm not quite sure which I like the most. I think it would have been nice to be able to choose, but anyway, it is supposed to be helpful for high DPI displays, for instance, and it will hopefully load the layers faster as well. And this is also a core functionality for rasters, since the GDAL driver for this use nearest neighbor. Well, another improvement I haven't really noticed, at least, is that the tiles are now rendered as they are loaded. So QGIS doesn't wait for all tiles to be loaded before it renders. It is supposed to be rendered as they are loaded from the MB tiles layer. If you are editing vector layers, sometimes you want to copy features from one layer to another. So here we have a source dataset with some values, and we have a destination dataset with the same attributes. However, in the destination dataset, we have some constraints. So, for instance, and the B attribute has a constraint that doesn't allow null values. So if we try to copy this, there will probably be some issues. So let's do that. Copy them and let's paste them. So, oops. First of all, we have a value or a feature that has a null. That is not allowed. I need to set something, or I can paste anyway. But to conform with the constraint, I can say that's a 2. And that was it. Okay, while I'm here, I want to look at some table conditional styling. So, for instance, if we say that column B, if the low value, if the value is less than 5, then print it in red. Like that. That is not a new feature. What is new coming in layout? So let's start a layout. Let's go back. There's another news with layout. In the layout manager, you can now search for a layout. So if a project has a lot of layouts, you can search for the layout you want in the layout manager. Back to the layout. Let's add a map like that. And let's say I want the tables here. And that should be the source. And this is a new feature. Apply layer conditional styling colors. That will apply the conditional styling from the table also here in the layout. There's also a new button here in the layout, and that is add fixed table. So now if you want, you can create a completely custom table. So it will be a table item with all the settings that you can do with that table, but you can also edit it. So you can a name, can add rows and columns, anything you want, and you can style layers as well. Like that. So now you can create custom tables that is not based on an attribute layer in your data. And these are some of my absolute favorite new features in QGIS, but I really like styling, so that is my thing. Let's see here, we have a polygon layer that we might want to change here to something. The blue color, for instance. I want to edit that. That will open our expression builder. One new thing is that if you search here, you can now search on keywords. So previously, if you search for, you wanted to split something into a list, if you typed split, you would get nothing. But now you will get the string to array function, which in all practicality is a split function. So there are now the possibility to search for keywords in the expression builder. Another new thing is that when you have created a feature, do I have any recent? You can save them. So you can save your custom expressions, give them a name, help text, and so on, and then they will be available in user expressions. So this one, really simple one, but anyway, if you create complex expressions and want to save them, now you can, and they will be available under user expressions. There is no feature to import or export those expressions, but I wouldn't be surprised if we will see that in a future version. Okay. Now some of my absolute favorites. One thing, random marker. So if you have a polygon and you want to fill it with points, you could previously have, let's see, point pattern fill, like that. Not really random, but now there is a random marker fill. And that will have some options. So let's say, like that. Let's make the marker really big, because there's another feature, clip markers to polygon boundary. So any marker that is on the boundary will be clipped to only be inside. But okay, the big one here. So if you follow the big black line, you will see that some markers are clipped. For me, this is really useful when I want to do some styling. Let's remove that. Another really great feature is selective masking. So for instance, if you have a label layer that like this, previously what you would do was to add a buffer, a text buffer like this. It works, but there are other nicer features. For instance, you could enable a mask for it instead of a buffer. So this is a new tab in the dialog. So you enable the mask, you set how far the mask should be, if it should have any opacity, or if it would completely affect the masked layer. But as you see, nothing happened, and that's because I need to tell QGIS what layers this mask should be applied to. So for that we have this tab, masks, and here I want to, these are the thin lines, I want to apply the mask to that line, and I want the mask from the text layer to be applied. There we go. So now the mask is applied around the text, still not here. So we go to this layer, we want to apply the mask to this layer, and now we see a problem. It will be applied to that symbol layer level, or symbol layer. So let's change that to no pen and add another symbol layer. That is only a simple line, like that. And let's go back to the masking and change from the background to just the line. And there we go. This will be extremely nice to have when doing cartography. And the last thing on my list, let's see, open. This is a situation I also end up in quite a lot. Here I have a raster layer with elevation data that are missing elevation data for the lake area. Not surprising. But now I can fill that because there is an option to display no data as a color. And in this case I can just simply pick a color like that. If I want to style my elevation data as hillshade, I will need to redo this. So I need to pick a new color for the no data, like that. And then I can do multiply and have a really nice effect on my map. Previously this would look like this, and I had to manipulate the brightness and contrast to minimize the effect of that was too much, to minimize the difference between the flat areas and the lake. But now I can simply go and I need to remove the multiply first. Normal. Reset that to 0. Then I pick the color. There. Then I go back and do a multiply. Like that. I think I can increase the brightness. Yep. So this will also be great for cartography. And I guess in a lot of different situations when you are missing data or have null values that are the same for the entire raster. That's it. That was the features that I've found in the changelog and on GitHub. There will probably be features presented that I haven't found, and there might be some features that I've shown you or told you about here that will not be included in the final release. And we'll see what it ends up with. Anyway, I'm looking really forward to the 3.12 release, and there are some really great improvements. At least for me, that is really interesting in the cartography part and the styling part. So, hope you enjoyed the video, and see you next time.